Now that I've been using List Perfectly for over 1 year, I wanted to do a review and give some insight whether this is a cross-posting service you should use for your reselling business. I had been reselling for quite a few years and really was hesitant on using a cross-posting service. I had a lot of doubts and fears that other resellers I know that I've talked to have as well. The first one, and I feel like the biggest one, is going to be I didn't want to have an item sell on eBay and then also sell on Poshmark and then have to cancel one of them. No reseller ever wants to have that happen, but to be honest with you, that has happened to us even though we are using List Perfectly, but it was due to user error. I didn't understand how to use List Perfectly in the beginning. I didn't know that when I go to mark an item sold, that if it's on a platform, a new tab will open up and List Perfectly will delist it from that platform. I was thinking since the tabs were opening up, it automatically was delisting it. So I went ahead and exited out on those tabs and it never fully delisted those items. So once I figured out that I needed to do that, I kind of went back, checked the sales that we had on the different platforms and made sure that they were not on any platform that we sell on. I was worried it was going to be too much work on top of everything else that we have going on. We are full-time. We sell mainly on Amazon, but also reselling is a big part of our business. We also do YouTube. I have a podcast, a reselling podcast. You should check it out. It's Paycheck to Daycheck. I'll leave it in the link below. But we have a lot going on. We sell locally, and really I just was worried that adding List Perfectly or whatever cross-posting service I was going to choose was going to add a lot more work and then also more time that I would have to put into the reselling side of our business. I remember before I went with List Perfectly, I was going back and forth. There's free options for cross-posting and there's other paid ones out there. I was worried that it was going to not be the best one, but looking back, I should have just gone with it and I shouldn't have kept spending time comparing each one. The time that I did by testing out all of them, I could have already been on my way with cross-posting with List Perfectly. Now this is not a sponsored video. This is my honest opinion from using List Perfectly the past year. Going back to 2022 in November, that was when we started using List Perfectly, we had about 1,000 listings on eBay. And so what I had to do was I had to import all of those listings from eBay into List Perfectly, which in the beginning it took a lot of time trying to figure out how the software worked and then also importing those initial listings. After that happened and we were already had everything into List Perfectly, then from there I had to take the listings from List Perfectly and decide if those listings were going to go on Poshmark, Mercari, both. Some of them didn't even get cross-posted because they were items that you can't sell on either one of those platforms. So in the beginning, it was, I will be honest, it was very time consuming. I would try to do so many listings per day till I had all of them imported into List Perfectly. It did take me about 2 weeks to do that. I kind of regret not using a cross-posting service earlier when we had less listings, because then it would have been easier when I started using it. Now what we do with List Perfectly is we still list everything in eBay, and the reason is it's Casey and I, we're a husband-wife reselling duo, and so when he's listing, I'm listing, and it's just easier if they all go into eBay. Also, eBay requires a lot of item specifics, so that's the really good thing about eBay is when you're listing on there and then you pull it into List Perfectly, you pretty much have everything you need to cross-post to Poshmark and Mercari, or really any other platform that you want to go on. They do have other platforms that you can sell on. It's just those are our main three. One of the worries I had was just adding another expense onto the expenses that we already have in reselling, but this is an expense, and so in our bookkeeping software, my Reseller Genie that we use, we actually mark it as an expense. So in my mind, it's kind of more, it's a necessity, it's something that we're using to help run our business, and that's how we categorize it when we are doing our bookkeeping and all the information that we need to give to our CPA during tax time. All right, so I want to share exactly how much we have earned on Poshmark and Mercari and kind of my thoughts on was it really worth putting in the effort and the time to use List Perfectly. All right, on Mercari, which was the platform that I feel like I listed the least on, and I don't know, I don't love Mercari. It's not my favorite platform. I would say it's probably down there at the bottom. I mainly list clothing on there and then any opened perfumes, lotion, things like that. So I don't list a lot on there, but we did make $1,311.90. So that was what we earned after they took out their fees and any shipping. Poshmark, on the other hand, did much, much better. On Poshmark, after fees and everything, we earned $4,006.71, which gave us a total of $5,318.61. So that was $5,300 that we earned in addition to what we already made on eBay. In the end, looking back at the time that I put into doing it, learning the software, all that, the expense that I had every single month, we use the Pro plan, which is $69.99. So we pay $70 a month for List Perfectly. So that cost per month, plus the time and the effort that it took me to cross-post everything, was it really worth it? And I have a couple thoughts about that. Since selling on Amazon and our reselling business, those are the way that we make a living. So when you have a normal W-2, you usually, at the end of the year, or at the beginning of the next year, you are lucky to get a 1 to 3% raise. The way Casey and I look at cross-posting and using List Perfectly is that we're giving ourselves a raise. We already have those listings on eBay. Those items are already up for sale. Why not cross-post those items? Get them in front of more buyers. So that was one thing that we did like. We looked at as if we didn't use List Perfectly, we wouldn't have earned that extra $5,300. Now, using List Perfectly, it was way faster than if we would have had to manually list on the specific platforms. So List Perfectly does make it easy. Another benefit of using List Perfectly, and one thing that I really like, is it's a second place to store your inventory. So it's a log of all the inventory that you've had, that you have, and that you've sold. So that is a really good thing. I like it because if Casey and I ever wanted to go on a longer trip, and let's say it's more than 30 days, maybe we're going to take off and we're going to leave for 2 to 3 months, we want to shut down all of our platforms, we could easily end all of the eBay listings, put everything else on vacation or end those listings too. And then when we come back, if something were to have happened on eBay, because we've had that happen before where listings have pretty much disappeared. I don't know how it's happened, but it has happened. So I like that List Perfectly is a good place that will store all your listings, and then if that were to happen and we lost everything, we could go back in and we could cross-post from List Perfectly to the different platforms. Now, we use my Reseller Genie for all of our bookkeeping, but if you don't use some sort of spreadsheet, software, something to store everything that you would need for tax time, List Perfectly will do that for you. So it will actually have a breakdown of what you're selling on each platform. So your sales analytics, you can put in for each listing your cost of goods, when it sells, what the shipping costs, any fees that was associated to that particular sale, and then it will also calculate your profit for you. So if you're looking for something that's like an all-in-one tool, then you can utilize List Perfectly. Another thing that I feel like was worth using List Perfectly to cross-post, I wouldn't have just sold certain items on different platforms. It was going to be way too time-consuming to manually cross-post, but by doing this, it really forced me to try different platforms. I don't know if I would have started on Mercari and Poshmark if it wasn't for List Perfectly. And then from there, I learned what items sell best on which platform. So that's why we don't cross-post everything everywhere, because there's certain items that we know are going to sell best on eBay, some on Mercari, and some on Poshmark. Now, the best thing about List Perfectly is the community. Casey and I were lucky enough. We attended the Phoenix eBay Open. List Perfectly was there as a sponsor, and we were able to meet Clara and Amanda, who are the co-founders of List Perfectly, along with a couple other employees. So they really are a close family. I love that they have a good Facebook group. It's very encouraging. They have a lot of input on how to use the software. There's really good tutorials. They actually have a podcast. So I think List Perfectly really, for the community, I think it's definitely worth it. Now, List Perfectly does have an option if you're curious, and not that if I've sold you in this video, but if I've, hopefully answered some of the questions that you have or some concerns that you've had on whether List Perfectly will work or if it's a good cross-posting service, we do have an affiliate link. You will save 30% on your first month. So I'll leave that in the description down below, or you can use the coupon code Freeway Flippers. I highly recommend if you're thinking of a cross-posting service, don't spend too much time thinking on it. Like I said earlier in this video, I am 100% happy that we used List Perfectly and chose them as our cross-posting service. I'm really excited to start off this next year using it, and really I feel like it is helping us make a lot more sales. If you have any questions about List Perfectly, leave them in the comments down below. And until the next one, I'll catch you on the flip.